It's a supercar slayer. It's a 10-second car. It's one of the Toyota triplets. Wait, is that a Supra? Before we can talk about the Supra, we gotta talk about one of its twin brothers, the Seleka. We've talked about the Seleka before, and how it was launched in the 1970s as a response to the Ford Mustang, and it was a good, two-door, sporty-ish car, but it could really use a little bit more performance at this time. So in 1978, the Seleka XX was launched in Japan, and had a straight-six engine, 12 valves, 2 liters, which was based off of the 2000 GT sports car. This thing made 110 horsepower, which does not sound like a lot, but the thing weighed just 2,800 pounds. It was basically an MX-5, almost 20 years before the MX-5 came to be. And it had 4-wheel disc brakes, which meant you could stop really fast, because it wasn't that quick, and the brakes were phenomenal. In fact, just like the MX-5, it was the definition of fun, but not fast. Although by the end of the A40, A50 series, which is the internal code number used by Toyota, it was making 160 horsepower, which is good for a 0 to 60 time of just under 10 seconds. Hey, it's the 1970s, don't judge it, alright? Which is why, in 1981, it was fully refreshed into the A60, where the Seleka and the Supra were fully launched globally in 1981. Americans, in our internal wisdom, decided not to follow Toyota's internal code numbers, and the A60 generation was known as the Mark II. This is not by Toyota or Japanese fans. This was by Americans. Toyota still doesn't call the Supra by its marks, but everyone else on Earth does, pretty much. Which is why Toyota punished us with a 145 eco-friendly catalytic converter version, so it wasn't that great. But Japan got a 180 horsepower version, which is a lot better, but it was also a lot heavier, 3,000 pounds, so acceleration and handling wasn't that much better than the A50. Luckily, the third gen swooped in and saved the day, with the biggest change so far. The Seleka and the Supra got divorced and became their own separate models. The i6 was also bored out to 3 liters, making 200 horsepower, but again, they added 500 pounds of weight to the thing, so acceleration was better. Not by much, but it was better. But it got a lot better when the new 7MGE engine was put in the thing, with 4 valves per cylinder, dual overhead cams, and most critically, a turbocharger with 230 horsepower. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. This thing came with semi-active suspension and acoustic control induction systems, or ACIS, to manage air intake compression and maximize power. But the peak of the Supra Mark III came in 1990 with this little thing called the R, more specifically the JZA70-R, using the new Toyota 1JZ engine with 2 turbos on it, making 275 horsepower. So not only was it faster accelerating, it had sports suspension, lighter sway bars, a bigger intercooler, Recaro racing seats, and air-cooled front brakes. This thing was a proper sports car now, and it can't get much better than that, right? I mean, the thing looks great in its good old 80s, early 90s style. It's got twin turbocharged i6. The thing is, it can't possibly be better than this, right? Well, the Mark IV wants to say hello. Officially branded as the A80, The body was streamlined to not only fit the styling of the new Toyota lineup, but also to reduce drag. And then there was the engine. The 3-liter i6, aka the 2JZ GTE. It might just be one of the most famous Japanese engines of all time. The twin turbos, mounted sequentially, made 326 horsepower. That propelled the mighty A80 to a 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds and a top speed of 160 miles an hour. This thing could rival, go toe-to-toe with the best that Ferrari had to offer for a fraction of the price. And not just in acceleration. The handling was fantastic. It could pull 0.98 G around corners. And even though the handling was fantastic and the acceleration was brilliant, the best part by far was when it stopped. You see, Toyota used a 4-channel ABS system which controlled each caliper in accordance to speed, angle, and pitch of the corner when braking. That's Formula 1 tech. This ridiculously complicated, that I can't even think of explaining right now, technology allowed the Supra to stop from 70 miles an hour to 0 in 149 feet. That doesn't sound like a lot now, but back in 1993, that was absurd. It was so good, it set a Car and Driver magazine record that would stand for 8 years, where it was beaten by 4 feet against the mighty Carrera GT. This was by far the most popular and arguably the most famous of the Supras, thanks to a certain 2001 film with some bald guy in it, I don't remember. Anywho, it was extremely popular. Unfortunately, good old California emission laws came into effect, and lack of sales also came into effect, which means we lost the Supra in early 2000s, and by 2002, it was gone worldwide. And those vehicles would, that would be the end of it, but no. The Supra held on because of the immense fan base garnered by the Fast and the Furious. Let's be real here. The Fast and the Furious Supra, bright orange, might just be one of the best movie cars ever. Right up there with the Bullitt Mustang, the DMC DeLorean, the Dodge Charger. That is an icon of cinema. But that wasn't the only thing that made it popular. We've all played Gran Turismo, where we used the legendary Castrol Super GT car to crush our competition. And in real life, it was crushing competition as well. The Super GT class was fantastic. And it wasn't just Super GT. They've been endurance racing, touring cars, Le Mans, and drifting. These things have been everywhere, but strangely enough, the Mark IV Supra might just be most famous for drag racing. What? That's an American car thing, damn it. Yes. However, the 2JZ is a phenomenal engine, which can withstand pretty much any power that you put into it. So, Supras can regularly hit 800 to 900 horsepower with the base engine block. The thing is a frickin' tank. These cars can routinely run the sub-9 second times in the quarter mile. And some of these vehicles are ridiculous. A tuning shop called Bunny 10 built a Supra to make 1,000 horsepower without NOS or methanol, can run the 6-second range at the drag strip. And if we're talking the full mile, Supras can hit 246 miles an hour from a standing start. The thing is a drag racing beast. This immense popularity carried the Supra legacy throughout the decades because, well, Toyota was too busy designing Priuses. What good can I say? That being said, a successor was rumored to be based off of the FTHS concept car in 2007. 3 years later, Toyota renewed the copyright for the Supra name. Then 3 years after that, the FT1 concept came out. And then a few years after that, Toyota announced a partnership with BMW to develop a brand new sports car. And finally, in 2019, the brand spanking new A90 Mark V Supra came out. Sure, it shared most of the components with the newest Z4 that was built in partnership with them. Sure, they shared most of their components, like the BMW 2-liter 4-cylinder and the BMW 3-liter 6-cylinder, making 255 horsepower and 335 horsepower respectively. You know, it was a lot BMW, sure, because Toyota can't really justify designing a brand new sports car platform from the ground up, so they had to share it. Which makes sense, that's fine. One thing though, Toyota wasn't going to let their Supra be a carbon copy of the BMW. First off, I think it looks a lot better than the BMW. The new Z4 is not bad, but it's not as good as the Supra. And then there's the performance. They both use the exact same engine, which means their performance should be the exact same pretty much. But people began comparing the Supra and the Z4 naturally, and found that the Supra was a lot faster. 0 to 60 in just 3.9 seconds faster. So some dyno testing ensued, and it turns out the Mark V power output was actually in excess of 380 horsepower. Some 45 horsepower more than what Toyota and BMW claimed. Whether or not the Z4 runs this, I don't know. But the Supra is a lot faster than the Z4. That is been tested multiple times, confusing many. But what's even better is, sure it was designed jointly with BMW, but it was designed deep down for the purists. The engine bay was designed to be big enough to fit almost any engine if you didn't want the BMW straight 6, including the 2JZ, because you can't have a Supra without the JZs in it. That's just not possible. So Toyota designed a workaround because they couldn't design a new 3J. There's been some rumors, but there's been nothing confirmed yet. So hopefully this video doesn't age poorly. This thing may be less than a year old, but modifications are spreading like wildfire in the tuning community. Just like the Mark IV that came before, and even to a lesser extent the Mark III. The Supra continues to be a tuner's paradise for the enthusiasts. And sure, the fanboys will get their pitchforks and their torches and say it's a BMW. But we got a 2-door, rear-wheel drive, front-engine sports car from Toyota that had more than 200 horsepower and lived up to the legacy of one of the greatest tuning cars of all time by still being incredibly tunable, even with its German heritage. That is an achievement we cannot undersell.